Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We took a break of a month in between, but we're back with these sessions. So today I have a very interesting guest, Birender. I'm not sure, he knows how I know him actually. So even before I started, my own setup and I was dabbling with, what I wanted to do, I was, talking to somebody in Amazon. And then they said, see, have you heard of this person? And I said, no, they said, you must check him out because he's done a lot of stuff for us. And it's, and he's been doing it for a while. And that's how, I kind of started following his work. And then we connected on LinkedIn. And we've been on LinkedIn, but, not personally connected. And then I, kind of realized that he could, kind of add a lot of value to our conversation today. And hence, we kind of spoke over what topics we could bring. And then we thought this would be an interesting topic. So Birender has a very interesting journey from being head of sales for many, many years and then transitioning, into positivity and happiness and, workshops for corporates. But he's been doing it for the last more than 10 years. And having been in this system for a while now, I know how tough it is. This journey has had its own struggles and thing. And Birender, very, very happy to have you with us with your wisdom and your, kind of knowledge that we can kind of use over here. I'll perhaps ask you to also to highlight a few salient points about your profile, and then we'll, start with the audience.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And we must thank our mutual contact for bringing us together.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, it comes very interesting because I come from a corporate background, much like I think most of people around here. I started my career selling luggage in upcountry West Bengal. Anybody from West Bengal here? So that's where I started from, right below in the ranks down there. My last stint, I was director of sales for Max Bupa Health Insurance, and literally covered most industries, covered the full level. And 2012 actually was the time when I actually had to think about what do I want to do in life. And I worked for like I said, I worked for Max Bupa, where attritions were at atrocious levels. And that's when I discovered the science of happiness. And when I started diving down into the science of happiness, that's when it became more interesting to find out that this field actually was a intersection of psychology, also called applied positive psychology. Behavioral economics had already kicked off by then. And of course, a lot of the psychology part of it. Then neuroscience later on joined the bandwagon. And that's when I said, hey, something interesting to bring to the world. And more topics I kept thinking about, writing about. And I started writing in the DNA. I wrote 92 columns in the DNA. And civility was one of them, which surprised most people. And so that's been my journey so far. So thank you for asking, Sriram.
Fantastic. And before we start, I want to also mention My Startup TV. I'm kind of collaborating with them for this session, and they're going to take this feed live across their platform. And they have a reach for about 80 countries and quite a huge number of subscribers as well. So thank you to My Startup TV for partnering with us and being able to take this to a larger audience. I hope this partnership kind of continues. So let's start off this survey. And I want to start with a little bit of audience, kind of engagement as well. And want to see if, personally, if you can talk about any one incident where you have experienced, kind of rudeness and, what really triggered you to feel, kind of a little bit charged about it. So what was it? The tone? Was it the words? Was it the situation? If there's anything that you'd like to share with us, then, we'd like to hear from you. And then so that we build, the rest of the discussion around some of those inputs. So I'm opening it out to the audience for, if you have any memory of any incident where you have experienced rudeness in the workplace or even otherwise, where we want to know, what caused you to feel upset about it. So, anybody would like to say anything? or if you're too shy, you can put it on the chat. But ideally, we'd like you to just speak up and talk about it. Anyone has anything to add? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I?
Perfect. Yeah.
So I guess after being part of the corporate for almost 3 decades, one sees being uncivil in very polite tones and tenors. And I've also come from a forces background where it's given in a soft, iron punch in a soft glove. So it's about I attribute it in terms of I think title hierarchy, entitlement, authority, that some mistake it to be a right to pass this kind of a conversation or choice of words or tone, tenor, and even posture that kind of makes the other person want to take a step back. The other thing that I would like to add is that having served in those two environments that I mentioned, it's then becomes how we want to kind of take it. So the forces taught me that it's not for you to question, it's for you to obey, right? So you kind of think it to be in a different, you process it in a different way. The civil taught me that if you want to be a human-centered leader, then you need to kind of process that from a different way. And your team should be, kept completely immune to the way in which, some of the leaders may come across to you, because that's how you build a human-centered organization. So I just wanted to add this.
Got it. All right.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Yeah. So sometimes rank. So is it rank? That's a hypothesis. Is it a command and control? That's another hypothesis. Let's call all of them hypotheses for today.
Yeah.
Come on, somebody else. Somebody else.
Somebody else. Different perspective.
Okay. How many of you noticed incivility today? Today, last 12 hours. Come on, give us some examples of incivility today.
Let me speak up. Okay, yeah, this is Will here. So, okay, I come with about 27 years of, sales development and growth, as my specialization or function area. I guess, being a salesperson, you learn to take the, initiative to, push people and to, sell your wares. I think from the point of view of, hearing rejection in various degrees of, brevity, as one would put it. It can vary from giving a very rational, giving a sound rationale to just being, attributing it to, what you call, bureaucracy and red tapeism within the organization. So that can be conveyed, as I said, in various degrees of, what do you call, of, I would say, of, rudeness or, backed up enough and more rational and, logic, and the whole value turned into an organization. That's what I would like to say.
Okay, yeah.
Great.
So that's another perspective, right? Which is a very interesting one, which is around, hey, this is processes have to be followed, and therefore whether you like it or not, this is the way. This is only one way of doing this. Okay. Anybody else? Last 24 hours, come on. If you haven't seen incivility, what are we doing here then? We don't need the discussion. We don't need the topic. The fact that all of you have taken an hour out for today, okay, let's speak about it. Let me ask a few quizzes. How many of you heard people honking around you? Heard honking today? Raise your hand if you heard honking. What would you consider? Would you consider that civil behavior?
Impatience?
Maybe impatient, but that's how many of you when you were walking through a door, somebody was ahead of you, held the door for you? Yeah, Varsha, that's nice. How many of you have taken a flight in the last 1 week? You're standing in line, and there's always this one person who will try and cut that line. Right? And this person will always have a very legitimate reason, right? But why this person has to cut the line. Yeah. How many of you have heard this? If I don't shout at my people, they won't listen. This is the only way to get work done. If I don't put pressure on my people, they won't perform. This is the only way to get work done. How many of you? And so therefore, civility can take many shapes in our daily lives, right? Yeah. So Sriram, back to you.
Yeah. So, for me, I think, we are very proud of our economic development. And we keep, kind of comparing and saying the third largest, fourth largest, and this and that and all that. And I'm often looking at data very differently and saying that, okay, if development has to reflect in the experience that you have on a day-to-day basis, and our experience on a day-to-day basis is not improving. It is just getting worse. Okay. People around us are becoming economically better and behaving worse in many ways as a thing. So it's not really, because at some point I really thought maybe it's about education. And, if people get a little more educated, maybe things will get better. And that was the perspective maybe about 15, 20 years ago. Now that is not an issue. And still you see this across the board. You step out on the road, from people cutting you to being, kind of completely disrespectful. And these are all well-educated people who are similar to you. And sometimes I wonder if it is so prevalent that maybe we are also doing it unknowingly, and not realizing it. To that extent, it's become, prevalent from, especially, the moment I step into traffic, it kind of hits me that, what is going on? How can we call ourselves developed when we just can't respect basic human needs? And that is, I think, something we need to ponder. We will never be a developed country till we fix our basic morality, our basic, kind of respect for people. And we come from a culture which is so evolved and so, powerful. And we can't even blame the British for this. We blame the British for a lot of things, but we can't blame them for this. This is our own doing, where I think somewhere in our need to get ahead, we've forgotten that, at the basic level, we are first human beings. We need to, kind of realize that. And I don't see our country becoming a really developed nation unless we fix this. And that's, I think for me, a big concern. And I think more people need to talk about it, because, and sometimes it's because the apathy and the, acceptance and the over tolerance of bad stuff, I think is causing us a lot of, kind of issues as a country in many, many ways. So on that note, I just want your perspective on what is civility, and then, we'll take it forward.
So first, I want to set the record straight, right? Incivility is on the rise, not only in the undeveloped or less developed countries. Across the world, data points are coming up day in and day out that trust is going down, trust in systems are going down, and that is being led by respect going down. So respect for the other is going down. Right? And then if you combine these two, incivility per se is also going down. And this is nothing to do with I've not seen any data points linking trust, respect, and incivility or civility to income, rising incomes, or even national incomes at a GDP level. Okay? This has been an easy excuse we gave ourselves to wear it as a badge of honor, right? That, hey, it's in our nature to be aggressive. So we will take on more aggressive goals. We will push the system more aggressively, and therefore we will get these amazing results. Yes, you do get those results. And unfortunately, when you get those results, they become a myth for us. The myth is that till I don't put pressure on people, till I don't micromanage people, till I don't monitor every single minute of what they're doing, Okay? And that's when I will get results. Okay? And therefore, people have started questioning, why do I need to be civil? I get more output when I'm disrespectful than when I am respectful, which is true in the short term. In the short term, you will get more tangible output. But if your output is measurable in terms of number of calls you made, you might get more number of calls. But number of unique solutions you generated, that's not going to come when you put people under this mode of fight, flight, or freeze, right? So first, it's a global construct, which is the fall of trust, respect, and incivility. And therefore, if you look at Christine Porath, she defines civility as first and foremost being respectful for the other person. Okay? And then it is about being considerate about the circumstances of this person. And then the third is about, once you've understood the perspective, it's about being compassionate. Okay? And a lot of people don't understand compassion. So I want to just define it for everybody. Empathy plus action is equal to compassion, a very simplified definition. Okay? So when you take action, okay, when you see somebody suffering and you take action, okay, so that's what we call compassionate and caring treatment. And because of which, then between two individuals, between two teams, there is positive connectedness. And then people start to connect with positive regard, with positive intent. And then what happens is people start to feel more valued, they feel more cherished, they feel more recognized. Okay? So therefore, you see, civility takes a higher platform, okay, with the foundations of not just polite manners, but about respect, consideration, compassion, and therefore positive regard. Okay? So that's going to be the definition we'll use for today for civility. Okay? Not just polite manners, just okay? Because when you hold the door for somebody, okay, what is the signal you're sending for that person? What's the signal you send when you hold the door for somebody?
I respect you.
Yeah, exactly, right? When you wish a security guard good morning with the equal enthusiasm as you might wish your boss or the managing director of your company, the signal it sends to the security guard is, hey, I value you. Correct? And that's when it begins to pay forward. Right? So that's the definition of civility. And just wanted to set record straight. It's not about the wealth of a nation. There's nothing to do with that. Yeah.
Vic, you want to go ahead with your question that you put on the chat?
I mean, whenever it's appropriate, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. You ask a question.
No, I was like trying to say, is incivility the real opposite of civility? Or is it a lack of exercised values?
So that's an interesting one, because in civility research, what's coming out clearly, and Tara Urish, her research shows only 15% people are self-aware. So imagine if only 15% of people are self-aware, what percentage of people will be aware of their values? Right? Now, so first is self-aware, then self-aware of their values. And now what percentage of those people who are self-aware, who are aware of those values, will exercise those values? Correct. And now let me make it even more interesting. What percentage of those people who are self-aware of those values, apply those values, but apply the values even when they are stressed, even when they are under pressure, even when they have to make those sacrifices? Right? So a very important indicator is awareness of your values and practicing of your values. Yeah, that is at an individual level, you've absolutely nailed it, Vikram. And that's the correct way. Yeah. A great question. Thank you.
Let's complete the thing around society and then move into workplaces. So what's the way to break free? So I know it's obviously not a very easy solution and not something perhaps that we can talk here and kind of get it sorted out. But do you even see a way out? Do you see that there's something possible to break free from where we are today with respect to civility?
Yeah. So, I'll build on what Vikram just talked about, because many times we confuse civility because we confuse tolerance with apathy, right? We tolerate that behavior of saying the phrase, not my monkey, not my circus. Somebody else's team leader is being rude to them, not my problem. Right? Some other functional leader is doing this to their team, not my problem. Okay. And let me tell you why that might become problematic. Because what research shows is this: when I am experienced to incivility directly, it decreases my productivity, it decreases my capability of collaborating, it decreases my performance levels. And that's not all. What researchers have found is, if I witness A being incivil to B, I had nothing to do with it. Okay, A was being uncivil to B, I am C. My own productivity and creativity goes down. So imagine just witnessing a incivil act impacts us, right? And therefore, at a societal level, okay, it's at a level that you talked about earlier, that in all the stresses that we put on each other, okay, that we begun to, when we see something wrong, we go into what we call a blame and shame mode. Right? If you witnessed the US presidential debate, okay, I was more interested in the reaction to the debate than the debate itself. And guess what? The moment the debate got over, party A followers went at it against the party B followers. Right? And therefore, it just shows to you at a societal level, okay, these are two individuals debating, okay, but why are you fighting against each other? Right? And you should see the social media, the way it's erupted about against each other's, okay? And therefore, that's when you see something which does not agree with you, okay? And Vikram, I'm going to take the contra point here. Okay, one is your values. One is when somebody contravenes your values, what is your reaction? When somebody contravenes your values, what do you do? Okay? And therefore, in corporate life, you would have heard of this phrase, let me call this out when something goes wrong. Okay? And that calling out is actually harmful, because when you call out a poor behavior, it is putting the person in a limelight or the harsh light of interrogation. And therefore, learning cannot take place when you're calling out and blaming and shaming people. Right? When your values are transgressed. Okay. And therefore, what do you do? Okay. What we recommend is, instead of calling out incivility, you call in civility. Calling in instead of calling out. Okay. How is calling in different from calling out? Let me explain that. So calling in, I will sit down with Sunil and say, hey, Sunil, you said this. Okay. I want to understand from you what led you to say this. What in your experience, in your opinions. Okay. Then I'll share what I saw, I observed. And then together, we'll come up with a mutually acceptable way forward. Right? So calling in is sitting down with that person, understanding that person's perspective, sharing your perspective in a safe manner, and then moving forward. Okay? I think that can happen only when we leave this thing about society and start engaging at a one-to-one level. Right? So therefore, when you label the follower of a certain party with a name, or even worse, when you label the leader of a party with a certain name, you're setting a very poor role model. Okay? So that's the second one. Okay, the first one is calling in versus calling out. Okay? The second is role modeling. Okay? And therefore, it's very easy to role model when everything is going all right. Right? But how do you role model when things are going wrong? Okay? And that's when you start to put up the benchmarks. Right? And the third is about drawing boundaries. Okay? Knowing, hey, this is a line I won't let anybody cross. Okay. And I'll tell you my journey. I used to be in a bank and I used to use foul language in sales literally every 2 sentences. I joined a company called FedEx. Okay. And FedEx is known at that time and still known to be people oriented. And luckily, I had a colleague, she used to report to me, but she came from the FedEx system and she heard me for a few days and she sat down and said, and imagine she's my junior, okay? She reports to me and she said, in the FedEx system, if people get to know your language, you'll never go very far. Okay. And Rupa, she said this to me, I still remember in 1998, and it shook the hell out of me, right? Till then, okay, I've had a reputation. If I use the 4-letter word starting with S, not even the F word, okay, people would freeze in the conference room if I have used even a foul word, because I made it a point to say, hey, I'm never going to use foul language. And therefore, I got to be known with a reputation to say, hey, first, I'll never use foul language. And very, very rarely will you see me raising my voice in corporate world. Right? And in fact, people knew if I'm speaking slowly, they would then get terrified. Okay, now he's really angry. He's speaking slowly. Right? And people would then run away. Hey, he's speaking slowly. Don't touch him today. Right? Yeah. And therefore, okay, it comes into your boundaries and what values and what reputation, what brand do you wish to build for yourself? And and I want to just sum this up by saying there was a very famous saint by the name Thomas Carlyle, a philosopher, a guide. He was asked, how do I reform the world? So Thomas Carlyle responded saying, look after yourself and we will have one less scoundrel to worry about. And that's how we reform the world. Right? Yeah.
Great points. A few reflections from my end. One of the practices that I also recommend for people, especially in meetings when you want to disagree, if you start with no or you're wrong, I think immediately there is a withdrawal and there is a defensiveness. So one of the things that I tell people is start with a 10% agreement, which is that not that everything that they said is wrong. You don't fully agree with them. So start with a 10% agreement of what, perhaps is something that you could be agreeable with. And then you move on to, kind of explain what your suggestion is. That way, you're at least keeping it as a dialogue rather than making it an attack. And I think that is, one of the key things where the person senses attack, they go into fight or flight, right? And then you don't make too much progress, depending on what it is. And it also disrupts the entire environment, right? The moment they sense the fight or flight energy in the system, the entire, kind of conference room goes into a different zone altogether. So I think that's one thing that I could, kind of think. And I think this whole thing about right and wrong, most times people think that they know what is right and their right is the right. And that is a huge issue because, if you, and especially if you see prolonged conflict and you sit and listen to perspectives, both people who are part of the conflict think that they're perfectly right. And that's all it is, that, who's right?
Yeah.
And very, very difficult to, kind of sit and then get past the conflict when you are not willing to see that there could be another right. And we have to explore what is causing them to think that what they are doing is right. And that is when it kind of opens up a thing. And this whole resistance to even listen, I think, is a huge, kind of sentiment. And we see a lot of it, that people are stuck to, oh, this is the way, this is the only way, and everything else is, kind of wrong. And so, because I think human beings are very nuanced, they're so small change in tone can just trigger somebody. And you may be thinking, what did I say wrong? I just gave you feedback. But the fact is, they felt disrespected, not by what you said, but how you said.
Yeah.
Right? And then you are caught in your thing of what you said. And there is no progress because you're constantly, at loggerheads thing. Any reflections from your end?
So, first of all, nobody likes to be told they are wrong. Right? Nobody likes to be told they are wrong. And therefore, when you want to come up with a contrarian view, okay, and how do you then look at yourself to say, hey, I'm going to ask a question, but I'm going to ask a question which is curious versus judgmental, right? And therefore, or maybe even supportive. So today I was doing a workshop on gender sensitization and inclusive intelligence. And we had a very interesting caselet which said, somebody doesn't want to promote a woman because she is married and she might not be able to travel. Okay. And therefore, how do you now address this situation? I said, okay, but how will you ask this question of her? Okay. The key is you have to ask this question of her, right?
Yeah.
So instead of saying, hey, this job requires 15 days of travel, can you travel? Now that is being judgmental.
Yeah.
What would a curious way look like? A curious way would look like, hey, this job requires 14 days of travel. What support do you need from me to enable your travel? Right. So like you rightly said, it's never what you said is wrong. All conflict, when you look at it, it's never what you said. It's always how it was said. And that's where civility comes in. Civility is about the how. Civility is about the how. Civility is not about the what.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Vikram, you had your hand raised before we go to Sitaram's query.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say that, the way I started to say, no, I wanted to say, that itself is, triggers people to immediately, take their stance. What we learned or what I learned for myself and what I practice is to say, I hear what you say. Can I give you a perspective that you would like to evaluate? Or I would like to say, I hear and I see some merit in what you're saying. Would you like to choose to see the merit in what if you were to do it this way? These two are generally what I play around with more. And the last is if someone says something completely not saying, say, you one feels tempted to say, okay, I'll do it, but it's at your cost, or you said it, kind of a thing. But then the wisdom in me tries to tell me is to say, we would definitely like to do a pilot and give you a result. And then you can take a call if you would want to do this across the organization or with more people. And that kind of at least makes the person want to think once again. So just wanted to add some thoughts.
Yeah. So it's all about when you see data points which go against what you are thinking, okay? And therefore go into a zone of curiosity, and instead of going into a zone of conflict. Okay. And I think what Sriram talked about, look at these data points. Okay, these ones I completely agree with. This one, explain this to me a bit more. So I used to have a chairman, okay, and when we would present business plans, and the Excel sheet on the screen would be 20 rows and 12 columns or 13 columns. And this chairman was so astute, he could pinpoint a certain cell. And all he would say is, okay, and absolute gentleman, he would go into Hindi and he would just say, ये सेल में ना थोड़ी मुझे दिक्कत लग रही है, जरा देख लोगे आप? Okay, and that was enough for the room to shudder. Okay, he could, out of a 12 by 14 matrix, he could point to that one cell and say, hey, look at this and come back to me. Right? And instead of you getting into a debate right there, or can you send me some more data points behind this conclusion that you have raised before we arrive at a conclusion?
I want to add, Birender, I think,
Yes.
my experience when I see this, right, that most people, are listening to respond, which means that, I catch only half of what you're saying, because the rest of the time I am in my head crafting my response to the first half of what you said. And I really don't pay attention. However, thing is, And that is a huge issue, because the moment I don't listen fully, I don't get the sentiment of what the person is saying, something triggered me, and then I'm already, in my head, nothing else is registering. Then I'm just, kind of trying to think. And I think that's where one of the key issues is that most people don't have the patience today, or, so much going on that, once the moment you disagree with something, you want to, kind of say it. And somewhere, corporates have also glorified it, saying, oh, speak up, speak up. So, in that speak
Yeah.
up, you become rude, and, the difference is not really, properly explained to kind of people. Yeah.
And I like to call that, we always, have you heard of this phrase? Can I be brutally blunt?
Yeah.
So I've started telling people no. Okay. And upfront, I say this no, but you can be helpfully honest.
Wow. That's a very catchy.
Right.
Yeah.
So first of all, it shocks people to say, hey, wait a minute, are you telling me not to be honest? No, but be helpfully honest, because we also call this compassionate directness, because sometimes we think either I can be compassionate with you or I can be direct with you. Right. But can I be both? Can I be compassionate and can I be direct with you in a conversation that takes place?
Yeah. And I think that's where, people think that being nice is, is weak. And I think being nice is difficult, especially, in a difficult, situation. Being nice is difficult. And you need to actually be in control of your emotions, be aware of your own triggers. It's a higher end, thing to be a thing. I'm not talking of disinterest or running away, withdrawal. Talking about really being nice. And it takes, effort and practice to actually get there. So
Absolutely. I want to just address Sitaram's query
yes.
he has, that are we really liberal after getting freedom for our country? Okay. And like I explained earlier, this has nothing to do with the political discourse or the freedom. Okay. I don't think civility is all about what you as society values versus you don't. Yesterday, I got into Bangkok airport and I got into the train. Okay. And I was the last person who could be fitted into the compartment. There were 4 people who stood outside, didn't try pushing me in. Okay. And there are announcements taking place on the platform. If the train is full, please do not push people inside. Wait for the next train is coming in 3 minutes. Right. So you see, at a societal level, they're running this. They know there is a problem. Instead of encouraging people to push inside, they're saying, just wait for 3 minutes. And you could see people waiting on the platform for those 3 minutes, happy to wait. And when that becomes a benchmark, I move on and I say, okay, I'm happy to wait 3 minutes because I'll be more comfortable. And then you sacrifice it for the larger good. Okay. So Sitaram, that answers your question. It's about, because civility and any value is top down. Any civility, any values top down. I have an open challenge. If the CEO starts wearing a tie and a shirt, a white shirt, in 2 years' time, everybody will be wearing a white shirt without any mandate going about. Tomorrow, the CEO starts wearing a black t-shirt. Watch what happens to your dress code.
Yeah.
Because people follow what you do, not what you say, right? So, but absolutely, since COVID, this has become much more and because along with that, political discourse also has gone through the window, right? Mayank, over to you. You have a question.
Mayank, go ahead, man.
Yeah. So firstly, Birender, Sriram, very, very pertinent topic. I think there is definitely a need of more civility, especially in the professional environments, right? I think will make world a better place, if not anything else. And I do agree. I don't have a question, but I do have few thoughts, right? I do agree to a lot of statements being made in terms of it's not about what you say, it's about how you say. And even before that, right, it's not about what you say, it's about what you think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So if you take a step back and if you believe in this hypothesis that what you say is an outcome of what you think, right? Thoughts result in words and actions, then I think that is the level at which we need to start working on, right? So for example, your example of the leader pointing out that, hey, I see some issues in the cell, I think that's good enough, right? So the thought process is that my assumption is that I'm dealing with adults, matured and subject matter experts. I don't need to tell them what to do, how to do. I just need to express that, hey, I see some problems, I see some issues, can you come back, right? So that's the thought process. For example, I worked with a leader, right, who was very, very pertinent about the language we use in any email or in any communication or any policy document, right? For example, we were trying to bring back the employees to office. We were drafting some hybrid work guidelines, and we said that, hey, failure to adhere to this would lead into disciplinary actions. This leader was dead against. She was like, hey, can we bring it into a more positive connotation, right? The thought process was that, hey, we don't want to build a culture of stick. We want to build a culture of openness. We want to build a culture of happiness, right? Where there is no stick, there is no disciplinary action. So can we say, hey, we encourage you to adhere to this, right? And so on and so forth, because we are dealing with adults. We don't need to tell them what to do, how to do.
Yeah,
Those are a
spot
few
on.
thoughts I thought
I
I'll
want you to
share.
go a bit deeper than that, Mayank, now.
Mhm,
Where do the
mhm.
thoughts come from?
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Where do the
I
thoughts
mean,
come?
what we see, and I think predominantly that, right? And the
So,
company
yeah,
we
but
are
thought
in,
comes from beliefs, right?
yeah.
Thought come from your belief. What do you believe? If you believe people are hardworking, if you believe people will do this, you will draft the email differently,
Mhm,
right? So therefore, and sitting parallel to belief or beliefs really comes from your habits, right?
mhm,
And therefore, I always say this, what I do every day becomes a habit.
mhm.
What all of us do every day becomes
Culture.
culture. Absolutely. And now let's say there are 5 of us behaving in a certain norm. A 6th person joins the call. Will this person follow the existing norm, or will the person try and disrupt everything? And the chances are
Yeah,
that,
95%
yeah, you will
is
find
alignment.
they will align, right? Because
Yeah,
this is the prevailing culture. Okay, till the person might find, hey, something's wrong here.
correct.
Yeah, great. Sriram, back to you. We've only got
Yes.
15 minutes left. So,
Yeah. So, just a quick reflection on what Mayank said. I think many times what corporates are looking for is that one is they want it to happen quick and they want to be in control of the outcome. So, when you want something to be in control of the outcome and you don't have patience, that is, I think, when you start, kind of forcing things a certain way. But if you want people to adhere, it is a longer thing. You have to convince, you have to communicate more, you have to explain more. And somehow, because of the equation, perceived equation where the management is, seemingly higher than the individual, you unknowingly use that equation to your, kind of benefit. And I don't think that's a good strategy. My belief is with technology and AI, people will have more choice. And if you continue to use hierarchy as a way to get things, they are going to go somewhere else very quickly.
yeah.
All
And
right.
there's interesting
Yeah.
research coming there, because as you go up in the corporate hierarchy, empathy seems to go down,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? If empathy goes down, now as a result, your social intelligence, emotional intelligence goes down.
Hmm.
And therefore, you will find conflicts rising much easily and much more faster.
And why would you think that empathy is going down? Just for my own understanding. Yeah.
So this is, again, very clearly mismatch of expectations of resources, because every single day the world around us changes,
Hmm.
and Therefore, we are expected to do much more than what we did yesterday with much less than what we got. So there is an ever expanding gap between the resources versus the output demand that we have, right?
Can I just add to the
Come on.
empathy piece, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Sriram, I also have witnessed this. I think it is also to the fact that as you move up the corporate ranks, your visibility increases, and therefore, so you have visibility to a lot of things which others do not, and therefore your expectation is that why is somebody else not thinking the way I am thinking? But you are not understanding that the visibility you have, others do not have, right? So sometimes that is also.
Yeah, true.
Well, Chand has a question on the chat. Okay, he says there are people who tend to be both aggressive and abrasive. They typically start an interaction with being abrasive, especially with juniors, because their entire operating style is based on making the other person uncomfortable or defensive. Any strategies for employees in dealing with such individuals, especially if they happen to be CEOs?
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? When you see conflict, we always go down the two route. Okay, should I suck it up?
Yeah.
Okay, do I just suck it in and keep quiet, or do I suck up to this person who's being aggressive? Right? That's the two typical strategies, which aligns with fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, which aligns with that. Or you then go into maybe a mode of conflict to say, I don't want to deal with this. And most people would then say, okay, let me just look for a job, which is your flight mechanism.
Yeah.
Right? So you see all the fight, flight, freeze mechanism taking place there. And therefore, whether it's your CEO or whoever, okay, I want to first ask everybody, how comfortable are you with conflict or handling conflict? What's your mindset about conflict? When you hear the word conflict, does your heart rate go up?
I am mostly running away.
Mostly running away, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, first you have to change your mindset towards conflict. Because especially when you're going to go up against a CEO, okay, who has the final say on most matters, okay, it's all about first saying, okay, let me change my stance about conflict, okay, and get more comfortable with conflict.
Yeah.
You get more comfortable with conflict. That's the first step. Because if you're uncomfortable with conflict, you will never go into a conflicting conversation. And any conversation where a CEO is abrasive requires that discussion. Okay. And okay, so first I talked about that, right? Suck up versus suck in, right? The second is classically we do kiss up or kick down. Right? So therefore our life is around these two S's and these two K's around it. Okay? So therefore it comes back to saying, okay, how do I want to deal with this? Okay? So therefore it could be about, when you have meetings with these people, okay, it's about saying, wait a minute, what can I do and what should I do differently here? Right? And therefore plan for the conversation. Right? So first, just reflect upon this encounter I'm going to have. Okay, and just maybe call it an encounter itself, because it might evoke that strong emotion. How are you going to respond to it the next time this happens? Okay, and so that's one aspect. First, plan for your response. Okay, do not go into a conflict about giving personal feedback with an unplanned conversation. Okay, so first reflect, then look at your own situation about what am I going to say differently. Okay, and there stick to the facts, stick to observable behaviors, and stick to how that makes you feel and operate. Okay. So I had another very senior person who used to report to one of the board members. Okay. What he crafted out was something interesting to say, to get the best out of me, if you do this, this is a better way. Or maybe this, if you do this, you will get something which is counterproductive. Okay. And then it's about you deciding what's important for you and drawing that boundary. Okay, and communicating the boundary that you have drawn for somebody. And that person should know what is the consequence of somebody crossing that boundary. Which does not mean you'll be punishing people. Okay? How will you have the conversation again? To say, hey, last week I mentioned this, maybe I want to talk to you about this again. Right? Or you did this, I noticed you did try to change and really I appreciated that. But hey, how could I do this again? So it's about giving that feedback, but sticking to facts and sticking to about how you feel. Okay?
I think the feeling is a great way to, because you can't debate that. No, if I'm feeling bad, you can't say you should not feel bad. I'm feeling bad. So you have to deal with, that input many ways and, kind of address it. So I've got Aarti to put a few resources on the chat, which Birender had sent earlier. So if people are interested in reading more about these subjects, there are a few, articles and studies which you can actually download and go through. But I want to, kind of close on a couple of things. So in the corporate sector, so who and what is really getting reported in terms of conflict, so that we'll kind of close with the strategies to deal with that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the strongest emotions which are emerging is the emotion of being humiliated.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the strongest one which is coming about and which is increasing also over a period of time. Right? So that's one thing you might want to look at, saying, hey, in my conversations, what's happening which is different? Right? So that's the first thing, which is humiliation. On the end of the spectrum, it could also mean intimidation. It could mean harassment. It could be physical harassment. It could be sexual harassment, etc. So in terms of intensity, you have that, right? So therefore, harassment versus humiliation. The most frequent one, which is really coming about, is humiliation very clearly. Okay? And we put some statistics out for you on the drive there. Okay, let me just pull out some very interesting ones. Okay, so that was the first one. And then the second one that I talked to you about earlier in the call, on the talk, how many of you witnessed a heated argument? Okay? And therefore getting into heated arguments or insults or abusive language. That's the third one which is coming about. Okay? So these are the top three, which is the source of conflict and therefore the trigger of incivility.
And, I think the issue with humiliation sometimes is that the person who's, kind of perpetrating it is many times not aware. And if you're not tuned in to the individual that you're talking to, perhaps you may not become aware, but you are causing damage. And over time, that is going to cause issues because they're going to go and talk to somebody else. That is how this whole toxicity kind of spreads. And you're wondering, oh, my team is toxic. They're not, morale is low and all of that. Whereas you, in a way, have triggered that whole thing, and many times even perhaps without your knowledge.
Yeah. So we call this social aikido. Okay? Social aikido. First, look at what you might be causing. Right? And therefore take responsibility for what you might be causing. And say, okay, I recognize I might be causing ABC. Take responsibility for it when you're in the conversation to say, okay, this is my part that I take accountability for. But now I want to share something that you can help me on where I need a change in behavior from you. Right? And then presenting those facts.
Let's summarize the how to fix this, Birender. And then if there are questions, we'll take it from the audience as a thing. So I want to kind of bring this whole thing to say, okay, we've discussed the problems. We've discussed some features of, how it plays out. But now what's the way forward? If you were to just look at a top three things that perhaps companies can look at actually implementing, doing, what would your recommendations be?
Yeah. So first is asking for compassionately direct feedback, or even better than that, ask for advice. I stopped asking people for feedback, okay, because we've gone down the route of feedback, feed forward. Nothing changed, by the way. Okay, not that you started getting better advice just because you called it feed forward. Okay, but call it advice to say, hey, I want to create an environment which is more inclusive, which is more civil. Is there something that I do which might be going against the values that I have set for myself? That's the first one. The second, which is counterintuitive, is find a mentor for yourself. Okay, somebody senior who's dealt with it in the past and has been successful. Okay, so finding a mentor would also help you. The third is asking feedback and teaching yourself. We talked about it earlier on how to read emotions, okay? Because emotional intelligence is becoming a future skill. And then I got two more. Okay, I have the time. Yeah, okay, I have the time.
Yes.
So one is just sit back on a daily basis and reflect back on a conversation. Okay, a conversation that went well. What did you do that the conversation went well? What was your contribution? What was the other person's contribution? A conversation which didn't go well, what happened? You will always find there was a trigger or an inflection point in that conversation where the conversation went off tangent. And then look at your own patterns. And then I want to ask you this question. How many people associate sleep or lack of sleep with incivility?
Yeah.
Ever thought about it? Because when you don't get your requisite number of hours of sleep, which is anywhere between 7 to 8.5 hours of sleep, your socio-emotional intelligence goes down. And therefore, your ability to be civil goes down. And therefore, when you look at well-being and overall well-being initiatives, okay, which is both physical, mental, social, emotional, right? Those tend to increase. So the one output of well-being initiatives is around civility also. Okay? So looking after yourself is equally important as a strategy for all of you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think let me just summarize that from what you said. One is, of course, to ask for advice. And I think, most leaders at least don't do it because somehow they think that they know it all and they're aware of, everything. And I was, I used to be like that. And at one point of time, I got some feedback which I couldn't understand. So I went back and asked people, and it took some time, took some persuasion for them to tell me the truth. But then after, what I did was I sent them the plan of what I was going to do and actually followed up with that. Then, I also conveyed that I'm serious about what they are telling me and I'm open to that. And then things started, kind of getting much better. They were more open to tell me, hey, perhaps you need to use a different tone over here and things like that, which are very sensitive things. And not everybody is open to that. Second, of course, find a mentor. And as you get higher up in your thing, that I think is a big deal. And I think most leaders need coaches. Somewhere in India, especially, I see that whole, thing where, if I look for a coach, then somehow, I'm not doing well, or there's a problem with me. I don't see that so much in the West, but in India, there is still that taboo around coaching. And on the top, you are alone. There is not many people where you can, because you don't want to share your vulnerability. You don't want to share your challenges openly. So a mentor, I think, will certainly help. Third is, of course, reading emotions, for which first you have to pay attention, listen carefully, and, and then, kind of notice what changes, what twitches, tone changes, and so on. Fourth is, of course, reflection. In fact, one of my ideas, to tell corporates is to, kind of get me to come and help have reflection conversations, not coaching conversations, but just reflection conversations with leaders as an initiative. Fifth is, of course, know your patterns. You have your beliefs, you have your triggers, and certain of those triggers keep playing out. If you know your patterns, it's easier to kind of think. Last, of course, is sleep, and it's a huge deal. In the modern generation, somehow we think we're all superhumans and we can do with 5 hours and 6 hours of sleep, and it's not possible. It elevates your irritation levels tremendously. And you can't now, when you're irritated, you can't obviously be civil. Your tendency to be incivil is much higher. Yeah, so I think that's a great, kind of summary. Let's maybe just open it up to the audience, Birender, if there's any closing thing, a couple of minutes, and then we'll close.
Sriram, just want to add something on a lighter note.
Yes.
Even not missing lunch or missing your food on time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A lot of guys, I know, hungry and angry together.
I call it halt. I call it halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Wow.
I call that halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Have you noticed most conflicts take place after 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Why is that?
Because your sugar levels have dropped dramatically.
Okay.
Have you noticed it? First thing in the morning, you'll never see conflicts and fights taking place. Everybody's pretty much at ease, pretty much at conflicts usually arise evening. Notice that. Notice in your offices. Notice in your workplaces.
Can you repeat that halt?
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
So I'm going to change my one-on-one with my boss, the timing of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. First thing in the morning, everybody.
Yeah.
Your most important task should be done first thing in the morning. Your brain is the freshest. Your boss's brain is the freshest. That's absolutely. And your boss will be much more willing to talk to you, listen to you if it's first thing in the morning.
Yeah, and I think for some of the things which you've mentioned, like lack of sleep, etc., the root cause is also the FOMO, right? We want to be there everywhere and be a part and have the pie, so I think that could be a separate session altogether in terms of how do we
you don't want to start that one. It's a 2-hour thing.
Yeah.
Everybody else, just for my benefit, everybody else, because this is like Guru Dakshina for me. If you want chat, you can at least tell us what's that one act of civility you'll bring to the world tomorrow. I'm not interested in what you do on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'm just interested next 24 hours. If you can tell us on chat, what's that one act of civility you'll bring to the world? Okay, anybody else? More reflections, more questions? Thank you, Varsha. Thank you. Yeah, eye contact.
Yeah, I think even holding the door, right? It's a simple enough activity, but very, for you to remember to do it. And
even a smile has great impact.
Actually, yeah.
A smile.
Yeah.
Smile starts a
conversation. Being kind, sir. Being kind.
Being kind, absolutely. Small acts of kindness.
Yeah. Very nice. Good to see you, Aman. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I think any closing things from you, Birender, before we wind up?
No, that's it. It was a pleasure being here. Some very insightful, some very tough questions, some very pointy questions. And I'm so glad everybody had those authentic questions for everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we had a wide variety of things to kind of cover. And thank you everybody for joining. Appreciate your participation as well. We'll be putting it up on LinkedIn, and it'll be available, and we'll put some snippets as well. Please continue to engage, and I'll see you again on the next webinar that we have. Thank you, Birender. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.